Hello everyone, it's the beginning of January and that means stats for 2025. It's the most magical time of the year, isn't it? So I think the way I'm going to do this today is I'm going to be recording my iPad's screen, and then I'm going to go through all the stats that my wrap-up gives me and we can share it together. So first things first, says I finished 123 books across 39,408 pages and 30 hours 47 seconds. I think I'm happy with that. It sounds about average for what I read on a year, so that's great. The first book that I read was Catalan Street by Magda Szabo, and the last book was The Heart Goes Last by Margaret Atwood. Both of them were 3-star-ish reads for me, so they were fine. I think I liked Catalan Street better than The Heart Goes Last, but you win some, you lose some. In terms of the mood, my curve mood thing, it seems to have very steadily go up throughout the year. So I started the year reading some dark things and it went up as the year went, and I think that is probably due to the challenges that I was doing at each point. So at the beginning of the year I was focusing on reading the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation, which had some heavy topic books, and then more towards the end I was looking more into the Herkiet prompts, and I read a lot more fantasy and funny books for that, so I think that's why it was going steadily. Then if I look at the number of books and pages every month, I started relatively steady with a little bit of a decline, and then in June or in July my reading shot up dramatically, and that is because Herkiet. I started Herkiet in July, so I started reading a lot more, but then throughout the year it started going down again, and December was pretty low because December was rough, but it's fine, December is over. But yeah, overall I think it's nothing too extreme in either direction. I think that it always happens to me that I want to be more or less steady throughout the year, and then there is a challenge that comes by and I'm like, I want to read everything, and then these jumps happen. We'll see if it happens this year again. In terms of the genres that I spend the most time with, literary is the most, which is normal for me, although it's less than 40 books, so that's less than a third, or about a third of the books that I've read, which is really little. Fantasy is the second one, which is quite unusual for me, and then contemporary, historical, and classics. Classics is probably due to the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation, because there were a lot of classics that recently got translated in that list, and that's why I think there are so many classics. I normally don't read that many classics. The longest book that I read was Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb with 838 pages. Too long if you ask me. And the shortest book that I read was Grandmother Moon by Wenatsu Lamkasun with 32 pages, which is a children's book, so it makes sense. The average length of the books I read was 324 pages, and it took me around 4 days to finish each book, which sounds about right, something that I'm happy with, don't need to change. The least time spent with a book is The Forbidden Notebook by Alba de Cespedes, which took me a day to read. I was audiobooking this one, that's probably why it took me so little time, and I really enjoyed that one. And I also think reading it in a short time makes sense, because it's like it's a book that builds up the mood a lot, so I would rather read those kind of books in short times. So that's. And then the one that took me the most time to read was Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie with 21 days. That's not accurate, I would say. I think I started this and I read like the first 10-20 pages and then I had to put it down because there were other books that I had to read, and then I picked it up and read it in like 3-4 days, which is the average. But because I started it the first 20 pages sometime before, it tells me that it's 21 days. But yeah, I didn't actually read it in 21 days, if that makes sense. The authors that I spend the most time with is Jessica Townsend, because I reread the Nevermore series, Magda Szabo, which I read 3 books for, because she seems to be in every single year list of the World Book Prize for Women in Translation, so there were 3 books of hers that I read, and Robin Hobb also with 3 books, because I binged the Assassin's Quest thing trilogy, which not my favorite. My average rating was 3.23, which whatever, I don't care too much about that. And then so some months were better than others. March was my highest average rating apparently, I don't know why, and July was the highest average pages, 4,275, which is probably because I started Hurricane and I was very hyped at the moment. And December wasn't my favorite, it's the one that I read the least, and my star rating was the lowest. Might have had to do with my mood in December, but it is what it is. Then the most shelf book that I read was Shadow on Board by Leigh Bardugo, which was fine. I enjoyed it. I don't feel the need to continue with that series, but I enjoyed it. The less shelved was Jackson's Magic's Eye, which again was a picture book that I got approved of, that I read because of Her Kids, and it was fine. And then the highest rated is Gaza, A Story of a Genocide, which it's amazing. I recommend. So agree, 100% agree. This book should be required reading for everybody. So yes. Then it says, I explored the works of 89 new authors, including T. Kingfisher, Bert Coles, and Lulu Miller. And yeah, I don't normally read the same authors over and over again, so that makes sense. And it says 24 of the books that I read were part of a series. That's normally not the case for me. I have read more fantasy this year, so that means more series, and I have also read a couple of books that are more literary that are also serious, like the Tove Jansson trilogy, memoir trilogy thing, the Vernon subtext, which is showing here, yeah, some other books like that. But yeah, I think overall it's because I read a lot more series, because I read a lot more. And I revisited a total of 5 books this year, so I reread 5 books again. I read some fantasy series, and for example, the Nevermore series, I had read the first 3, and I reread the first 3 to read the 4th one. I had also read Assassin's Apprentice before, but it was like, I don't know, 7 years ago, so I reread it to read the other ones. I decided not to finish 6 of the books I picked up this year, so 6 DNFs in a year is not too bad, one every couple of months. I find that I tend to DNF more depending on my mood. Sometimes I just don't have the patience, and so I DNF a lot, and sometimes I just persevere with the books. I don't tend to DNF a lot. I read 42 books from my own shelves this year. I would expect that to have been more, but maybe, I don't know how it works in Storygraph, like if I own it and I read it and then I unhaul it, if it still counts as I read from my own shelves, I don't know. But I think it was a little more than 42. And then I successfully completed 5 reading challenges. And that's all the stats that this gives me. And then if we look at the more detailed page of stats, most of the books I read, 60 of them, were reflective. they were emotional. There was a lot of adventures, which again has to do with the fantasy probably. Informative. I also read quite a few non-fictions, I feel like. Dark, mysterious, challenging, sad. Funny is quite high, and lighthearted is quite high for how much I normally read. So yeah, maybe I needed a happy year. And in terms of pace, most of it is medium, then a lot of it's slow and a little bit fast, which is common for me. And then page number, half of it was below 300, half of it was above 300, a little bit chunk of 500 plus. Again, normal. Audiobook length, I think I read like 1 or 2, so not much to say about that. Fiction non-fiction is 30-70, which seems to be between 25 and 30% of my reading is non-fiction. 30 I'm happy with, so nothing too crazy. And yeah, the genres we have already seen. And then in the format, 85% of my format was print, which I'm very happy about. The rest is the digital or audio. I still have a few arcs, especially from NetGalley and stuff, that I eventually read here and there, but I am very happy that the majority of my reading is print. And then in terms of language, 97.6% of the books I read were in English, and then I think I read 1 Dutch book, 1 French book, and 1 Spanish book, and that's it. I would like to maybe read a little bit more in other languages next year, but I think English is by default the easiest language for me to access, so it's by default what I read. If I go to Spain, I might pick up something else in the future, but for now I don't care too much about that. So yeah, those are all my stats. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what your stats look like, and what we have learned from this. I don't know what I have learned from this. That I have very stable choices when it comes to what I enjoy in my fiction, and that I should stop getting overexcited by certain challenges that spike my reading for random reasons. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe I just enjoy them. But yeah, those are my stats for 2025. Let me know how yours look like, and in the next video, bye!